I was halfway across the parking lot when I realized nobody was coming to greet me. Not my daughter, not the wedding coordinator, not even one of the ushers. I stood beside my old blue Ford pickup, holding the small wooden box that contained my late wife's wedding ring. I had planned to give it to my daughter after the ceremony, just before the father-daughter dance. Her mother had wanted that ring to stay in the family. She had made me promise. I checked my watch. 23 minutes before the ceremony. Maybe everyone was simply busy. I smiled to myself, straightened my jacket, and started walking toward the entrance of the vineyard where the wedding was being held. It was one of those places people dream about. Endless rows of grapevines stretched across rolling hills. White chairs lined up perfectly on a green lawn. Soft piano music drifting through hidden speakers. Everything looked expensive. Far more expensive than anything I had ever imagined for my little girl. As I reached the entrance, a young woman wearing a headset stepped in front of me. "Good afternoon, sir." Invitation. I handed it to her. She looked at the card, then at me, then back at the card. "I'm sorry," she said with an awkward smile. "Would you mind waiting here for just a moment?" "Of course." She walked away quickly. That was strange. I had never been asked to wait at my own daughter's wedding. A minute later, 2 security guards appeared. Not aggressive, just standing there. One positioned himself near the entrance. The other stayed a few feet away from me. People walking by started looking in my direction. A couple whispered. Someone glanced at my truck. I suddenly became very aware of my clothes. I wasn't wearing an expensive suit. I couldn't afford one. My charcoal gray jacket was 8 years old, professionally cleaned every spring. My brown boots had fresh polish on them. The only new thing I owned was the blue tie my daughter had given me 3 Christmases earlier. I thought I looked respectable. Apparently, someone disagreed. Then I heard high heels clicking across the stone walkway. A woman in an elegant cream-colored dress approached with the confidence of someone used to giving orders. I recognized her immediately. Margaret Whitmore, my future son-in-law's mother. She stopped in front of me without offering a smile. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes. I'm afraid there's been a small misunderstanding." "I'm sorry." She glanced toward my truck before looking back at me. "We've worked very hard to create a certain atmosphere for today's event." I wasn't sure what she meant. "So have I," I answered politely. She smiled, but there wasn't a trace of warmth in it. "I'm sure you have." Then she lowered her voice just enough to sound polite, but still loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "I think it would be better if you parked somewhere out of sight." I frowned. "I'm parked in the guest parking lot." "Yes, but that vehicle is rather—" She paused. "Rustic." A few people nearby chuckled. I looked over my shoulder at my pickup. It was 17 years old. The paint had faded. There was a small dent on the passenger door from a hailstorm years ago. But I washed it every Saturday. I had driven that truck over 500,000 miles. It had taken my daughter to elementary school, to piano lessons, to college orientation, to her first apartment, and today, it had brought me to her wedding. "I don't understand," I said quietly. Margaret folded her hands. "We have guests arriving from Boston, New York, and San Francisco. Some are business associates of my husband. We'd rather not have—" She searched for the right word. "Certain first impressions." For a moment, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. Then she continued, "If you'd like, one of our staff can direct you to a parking area behind the service buildings." Behind the service buildings. So no one would see my truck. Or me. Before I could answer, another voice joined in. I thought that was the father. Someone laughed. I assumed he was one of the maintenance workers. More laughter. Not loud. Not cruel. Just enough. Enough to make a 68-year-old man feel 12 years old again. I looked toward the ceremony lawn. From where I stood, I could just barely see my daughter, Emily. She was standing with her bridesmaids near the garden entrance. She looked beautiful. For a second, our eyes met. I waited for her to wave, to smile, to walk over. Instead, she looked away. My chest tightened. Maybe she hadn't heard. Maybe she didn't understand what was happening. Or maybe she did. Margaret took one small step closer. "Mr. Carter, I really think this would be best for everyone." I looked down at the little wooden box in my hand. Inside was the ring my wife had worn for 34 years. The ring she had asked me to give Emily on her wedding day. Suddenly, it felt much heavier than gold should. Without saying another word, I slipped the box back into my jacket pocket. "I won't cause any trouble," I said. "I appreciate that." I nodded once, turned around, and started walking back toward my truck. Every step felt longer than the last. I had spent 30 years driving 18-wheelers across 48 states. Snowstorms, floods, mountain passes, nights so lonely you forgot what your own voice sounded like. None of it had prepared me for walking away from my own daughter's wedding while pretending not to cry. My hand had just reached the driver's door when I heard someone shouting behind me, "Mr. Carter." I turned. It wasn't Emily. It wasn't Margaret. It was Ethan, the groom. He was running across the parking lot in his tuxedo, ignoring everyone calling after him. When he finally reached me, he was slightly out of breath. "Please," he said, "don't leave." I looked at him in confusion. "I don't think your family wants me here." He shook his head. "I need 10 minutes. "What for?" He looked back toward the ceremony, then at me again. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't embarrassed. It looked determined. "I found out something 3 days ago," he said quietly. "And if it's true," he swallowed, "this wedding can't start until everyone else knows it too." He looked me straight in the eyes. "Please trust me. Just 10 more minutes." As Ethan stood in front of me, I couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at me with that much sincerity. 10 minutes, he repeated. "That's all I'm asking." I studied his face. He wasn't trying to avoid an awkward situation. He wasn't trying to calm me down. He genuinely looked like a man whose entire world had shifted in the last few days. I nodded. "All right." He let out a quiet breath of relief. "Thank you." Then he hurried back toward the venue without another word. I leaned against my truck and watched him disappear behind the garden gate. For the first time that afternoon, I had no idea what was happening. If you had asked me 25 years earlier whether I'd ever imagined standing alone in a wedding parking lot, waiting for permission to attend my own daughter's ceremony, I would have laughed. Back then, life was simple. Emily was 6 when her mother, Sarah, passed away after a long battle with cancer. The night before she died, Sarah squeezed my hand and whispered something I'll never forget. "Don't let Emily grow up believing she lost both of us." I promised. And from that day on, every decision I made revolved around one little girl. I was a long-haul truck driver. The money wasn't great, but it paid the bills. Sometimes I'd be gone for 2 weeks at a time. Every mile I drove, every overnight delivery, every holiday spent on the road had one purpose: to give Emily opportunities one never had. I learned how to braid hair by watching cassette tapes at truck stops. I attended school plays after driving through the night without sleeping. I burned more dinners than I can count, but eventually I figured out which smoke alarm battery to remove first. We didn't have much, but we always had enough. Every birthday, Emily would ask why I never bought myself anything. I'd smile and tell her the truth. I already have everything I need. Years passed faster than I expected. She graduated high school with honors. Then came college. The tuition was more than I'd ever imagined. So I sold the only thing I'd owned purely for myself. A 1968 Harley-Davidson I'd spent 15 years restoring piece by piece. Emily cried when she found out. I told her motorcycles could always be replaced. Dreams couldn't. She hugged me tighter than she ever had before. For a while, I thought nothing could ever come between us. Then she met Ethan. He was polite, respectful, hardworking. I liked him immediately. But meeting Ethan also meant meeting his family. The Whitmores lived in a different world. Country clubs, private schools, vacation homes, people who discussed investment portfolios over dinner as casually as I talked about diesel prices. They were never openly rude. Not at first. Their comments came wrapped in compliments. "You must be so proud Emily made it this far. She certainly worked hard to overcome difficult circumstances. It's inspiring how far determination can take someone." Every sentence reminded me that, in their eyes, I didn't belong. I ignored it, because Emily looked happy, and that was all I'd ever wanted. Then, 1 week before the wedding, she called me. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything." There was a long pause. "Would you mind renting a nicer car for the wedding?" I didn't answer immediately. "My truck embarrasses you?" "No, it's just—" Another pause. "I don't want people making assumptions." I looked through my kitchen window at the old blue pickup sitting in the driveway. That truck had carried our entire life. but hearing my daughter's voice, I couldn't bring myself to argue. "I'll think about it," I said softly. In the end, I drove the truck anyway, not because I wanted to make a statement, because I couldn't imagine arriving at the most important day of her life in a car that wasn't truly mine. And now, standing alone in that parking lot, I couldn't stop wondering whether that decision had cost me my place at her wedding. Just then, the music suddenly stopped. Something inside the venue had changed. The music stopped so suddenly that even the conversations faded. People began looking around in confusion. From where I stood beside my truck, I couldn't see the ceremony lawn anymore, but I could hear voices. At first they were quiet, then louder. Someone was clearly arguing. A few guests started walking toward the entrance instead of taking their seats. Another minute passed. Then Ethan appeared again. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Emily was with him. Her makeup was flawless, but her eyes were already red. She walked toward me slowly, as if every step weighed more than the last. When she finally stopped in front of me, neither of us spoke. She looked down at the ground. "I'm sorry, Dad." The words were barely louder than a whisper. I wanted to tell her everything was fine, that she didn't owe me an explanation, but neither of us believed that. "What happened?" I asked gently. Emily looked at Ethan before answering. "He knows." I frowned. "Knows what?" Ethan reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a thin manila envelope. I wasn't supposed to find this. He handed it to me. Inside were copies of old financial records, scholarship payments, bank transfers, receipts dating back nearly 10 years. At first, they didn't make any sense. Then I saw the account number. "Mine." I looked up at him. "Where did you get these?" "My uncle sits on the board of the Carter Educational Foundation." I stared at him. I had almost forgotten that name. Years earlier, after selling my Harley and paying for Emily's last year of college, I still had a little money left. Not much, just enough to start a small scholarship through the local community foundation. I asked them to keep my name off it. Every year, they quietly helped students who had lost one or both parents. No ceremonies, no newspaper articles, no photographs, just tuition checks. That was all I ever wanted. Ethan continued. "I was reviewing some paperwork for a charity event my company sponsors." He pointed at the documents. "Your name wasn't listed anywhere, only the account number, but I recognized the address connected to it." Emily looked at me, completely stunned. "You never told me." I shrugged. "There wasn't much to tell." "Much to tell," she repeated. "You've been paying for other kids to go to college while still working overtime yourself." I smiled faintly. They needed the money more than I needed another motorcycle. She covered her mouth with both hands. I thought. She whispered, "What did you think?" She couldn't answer, but she didn't have to. I already knew. She thought I had never moved forward, that I had stayed in the same little house because I lacked ambition, that I drove the old pickup because I couldn't afford anything else. She had never realized those were choices, not failures. Ethan took a deep breath. "There's more." I looked back at him. I spoke with Professor Daniels 3 days ago, Emily's old economics professor. He told me that every semester, one anonymous donor insisted on paying emergency tuition for students who were about to drop out. I smiled. "He talks too much." "No," Ethan replied. "He finally talked enough." Silence settled between us. Behind the vineyard, guests were beginning to wonder why the ceremony hadn't started. I could hear murmurs growing louder. Then Ethan said something I never expected. "I asked my mother why she wanted your truck hidden." His jaw tightened. "She said appearances matter." He looked directly at me. "I think character matters more." Before I could respond, someone called his name from across the lawn. It was Margaret. She sounded impatient. "The guests are waiting." Ethan didn't even turn around. Instead, he looked at Emily, then back at me. "I'm not getting married," he said calmly, "until every single person sitting out there knows who you really are." For a moment, nobody moved. Emily stared at Ethan as if she wasn't sure she'd heard him correctly. "What are you saying?" she asked. "I'm saying we pause the ceremony." His voice remained calm, but there was no hesitation in it. "My family needs to hear the truth." Emily glanced toward the lawn where nearly 200 guests were waiting. "My mother is going to lose her mind." Ethan gave a small, humorless smile. "I think she already has." Without waiting for another response, he turned and walked toward the ceremony. Emily looked at me. I'm so sorry, Dad. I gently squeezed her shoulder. Go. No. She shook her head. I'm staying with you. For the first time that afternoon, I saw my little girl again. Not the successful lawyer, not the elegant bride, just the child who used to hold my hand while crossing the street. Together, we walked back toward the ceremony. The conversations stopped as soon as people noticed us. Margaret was standing near the front row, her expression somewhere between confusion and anger. Ethan, she called sharply, what exactly are you doing? Instead of answering her, he walked to the microphone beside the floral arch. He tapped it once. The speakers crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, the entire vineyard fell silent. I owe everyone here an apology. Guests exchanged puzzled looks. This ceremony is going to begin a little later than planned. Margaret took a step forward. Ethan, he raised one hand. Please, let me finish. She froze. He looked across the crowd before continuing. A few minutes ago, someone I love was treated with disrespect before he even had the chance to walk through these gates. No one said a word. My future father-in-law was judged because of the truck he drove and the clothes he wore. I noticed several people lowering their eyes. They assumed his life had been defined by what he owned. He paused. The truth is, his life has been defined by what he's given away. He held up the manila envelope. 3 days ago, I discovered that, for nearly a decade, this man anonymously paid college tuition for students who had lost their parents. A wave of whispers spread through the audience. He never told anyone. He never asked for recognition. He simply believed that if he could change someone's future, that was enough. Emily reached for my hand. Her fingers were trembling. Ethan continued. He sold his motorcycle to make sure his daughter could finish college. He spent years driving trucks across the country, so she would never have to give up on her dreams. And today, his voice hardened. He was asked to hide his truck because it didn't fit the image of this wedding. Silence. Complete silence. Margaret's face had turned pale. She opened her mouth as if to explain herself, but no words came. Then something happened that I never expected. An elderly man slowly stood up from the third row. I recognized him after a moment. Professor Daniels, Emily's former professor. I can confirm every word, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I've watched this man help students for years. Another woman stood, then another. One of them wiped tears from her eyes. My son was one of those students, she said. We never knew who paid his tuition. She looked directly at me. Until today. The silence broke into quiet applause. It started with just a few people. Then more joined in. Within seconds, nearly the entire audience was standing. Not because of a speech, not because of a dramatic moment, but because for the first time, they understood the difference between wealth and generosity. I didn't know where to look. I'd spent my whole life avoiding attention. Now, 200 strangers were applauding me while I wished I could disappear. Emily wrapped both arms around me. I'm so ashamed, she whispered through tears. I'll let them make me believe appearances mattered. I hugged her tightly. You made a mistake. She cried harder. I hurt you. Yes. The word came out quietly. But you're here now. She nodded against my shoulder. Across the lawn, Ethan stepped away from the microphone. He walked straight toward his mother. She looked smaller than she had only minutes earlier. He spoke softly enough that only those closest could hear. Mom. She looked at him hopefully. I'm disappointed. Those 2 words seemed to hit her harder than if he had shouted. Then Ethan turned toward me once more. There is only one way this wedding happens today. Every eye followed him. He smiled. Mr. Carter, if you're still willing. He extended his hand toward the aisle. Would you do me the honor of walking your daughter down it? For a few seconds, I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, because I wasn't sure I could trust my voice. I looked at Emily. She was crying openly now, no longer trying to hide it. The little girl I'd raised alone after losing her mother seemed to be standing in front of me again. She reached for my hand. Dad, I'm so sorry. I know, I said quietly. I should have come to you the moment they started making comments about your truck. You should have. I should have told them they were wrong. You should have. I should have remembered everything you sacrificed for me. I smiled sadly. But now you do. She nodded. I do. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. The small wooden box was still there. I had almost forgotten about it. Emily frowned. What's that? I opened it carefully. Inside rested Sarah's wedding ring. The simple gold band had been polished over the years, but the tiny scratch near the edge was still there. Emily recognized it immediately. She gasped. Mom's ring. I nodded. The night before she passed away, she asked me to keep it. I swallowed. She wanted me to give it to you on your wedding day. Emily covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. You've carried all this time? 28 years. She picked up the ring with trembling fingers. I don't deserve this. I gently closed her hand around it. Maybe not today, but I believe you'll spend the rest of your life proving that you do. She threw her arms around me. This time neither of us tried to stop the tears. When we finally stepped apart, Ethan was still waiting at the entrance to the aisle. He hadn't rushed us. He understood that some moments couldn't be hurried. He smiled. Ready? Emily looked at me. I offered my arm. Let's finish what your mother dreamed about. She slipped her arm through mine. Together, we began walking toward the ceremony. The guests stood once again, not because tradition required it, because respect did. As we passed the front row, Margaret stepped into the aisle. For a second, I wasn't sure what she intended to do. Then, to everyone's surprise, she lowered her head. I owe you an apology, Mr. Carter. Her voice shook. I judged you without knowing anything about you. I was wrong. I looked at her for a moment. There was no anger left inside me, only exhaustion. I accept your apology. She looked relieved, but I raised one finger. Just remember something. She nodded. The easiest person to underestimate is the one who never feels the need to impress anyone. She quietly stepped aside. Emily squeezed my arm. I'll never forget that. Neither would I. At the altar, I placed my daughter's hand into Ethan's. He looked me straight in the eyes. I promise you something. What is it? I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she never has to choose between her family and other people's opinions. I believed him. For the first time since arriving at the vineyard, I felt completely at peace. The ceremony finally began. It wasn't perfect. It started almost an hour late. People had cried more than anyone expected. The schedule was ruined. The photographs probably captured more tears than smiles. But somehow, it became exactly the wedding it was supposed to be. A year later, Emily and Ethan welcomed their first child, a little girl. They named her Sarah. Every Sunday afternoon, they came to my house. My granddaughter loved climbing into the driver's seat of my old blue pickup, pretending she was driving across America. One afternoon, Emily laughed and asked if I was ever going to replace that truck. I smiled. Why would I? She grinned. Because you can finally afford to. I looked through the window at the faded blue paint shining in the sun. That truck carried every important part of my life. It brought your mother home from the hospital. It took you to your first day of school. It moved you into your college dorm. And despite everything, it brought me to your wedding. Some things don't become valuable because they're expensive. They become valuable because they refuse to leave your side when life gets difficult. If this story taught me anything, it's that people will always notice the car you drive, the clothes you wear, or the house you live in. Very few will take the time to discover the person behind them. But those who do, they're worth keeping close. So let me ask you something. If you had been in my place, would you have forgiven your daughter after what happened that day? Or would her silence have been something you could never truly forget?